So we have played Evoker these days, and I want to give you guys a bit of a review of what I think has the best ranged PvP spec in the game, and probably top 2, top 3 best healing specs in the game, depending on what you're playing. I think RPGs, they are like the top 1 spec with mistweavers. And then you have like obviously augmentation, which I'm going to talk a bit about because I did play a lot of augmentation. But I have like some controversial takes about it. So let's talk about devastation first. Devastation is, in my opinion, the best ranged spec in the game, at least for PvP. Um, I would even say in twos it is actually very strong, depending on the comp. In threes, you are a machine. Like the damage that you're doing is obnoxious. And in solo shuffle, I think it's very hard to contain an evoker. It's very hard to stop an evoker from doing anything because you have so many schools and you have so many tools. I think the only thing that you're lacking is really good CC because you are like very meh CC, I would say. But overall, your damage is like, I would say the wet dream of a destruction warlock, pretty much. But it is really, really strong. Um, is it fun? First and foremost, I'm going to say Evoker. The reason why I'm not really playing too much Evoker outside of the testing week, because I did test it for a week now, and I wanted to make a video about it. Evoker itself is a class that if I can just ignore everything around, like for example, this silly looking Drake, like Draktyr, very, very slim, doesn't have any transmog except your shoulders and your weapons, or weapon and your offhand or your whatever. I find it very silly, and that's why I don't really play too much Evoker. I know that you have like T-morph or whatever add-on you can use to change this, and you can, but I would rather play just like always like this. At least I can see my mog. I think the transmogs for evokers are actually looking very cool. Like for example, these ones are looking quite nice. Like they have like great mogs. It just is a shame that you cannot really show it while you're fighting. And I know some people don't care about that, and that's great. If you don't care about it, then you can jump to the conclusion of what I'm going to say after this on this video. But I think like having your mog being shown while fighting is the theatrics that I always liked in PvP. The reason why I like the Swifty videos in vanilla, for example, the reason why I like Drake Dog, the reason why I like PvP montage videos is like the theatrics, the like showing your class and your character to be cool and to be like something you would like to see for your own gameplay. It has nothing to do with competitivity, but it has to do with the appeal of the eye. And for some reason, I just don't like it. Like I don't really like playing Pandaren, although the active is very strong, or why I don't like playing Goblin, or why I don't like playing Worgen these days. Like some races, even if they had like great ratios, I would not be playing that because it does look silly to me at least. And this looks very silly, while I think the transmogs are like really, really beautiful. Like I mean, they have really great mogs, and it's a shame that they did what they did, and hopefully they do change it to at least like if you are turned into this that you see your mog, then I would be making a bit more less dramatic comments about like how I detest the race. Um, but it is what it is, right? Outside of that, I think if you would just forget about the model of Draktyr, I think the class is playing very well, and it is really cool how it plays, and it's fun to deal big amount of damage. Again, we are like living in a world in World of Warcraft. Funny enough that burst damage is becoming more rare than anything else, except for a few classes and specs. But I would say Elemental Shaman has a lot of burst, but mostly it is consistent damage. Enhancement Shaman right now has burst, but it is also mostly consistent damage. Like, it's always going to be the same numbers popping off. It's not like something you're going to do, boom, someone is like destroyed 100 to 0, while Evokers has that. Even Arms Warriors and Fury Warriors, like, the damage is consistent. It's not like something you're going to like pop off and someone gets deleted. More often than not, it's not going to happen. But for Evokers, at least for Devastation Evoker, you have that. If you're popping Dragon Rage, which is a 2-minute CD, it feels really strong because you have like your mastery, you're trying to max out mastery to deal insane amount of damage. And if you have like abilities like Shattering Star, which is going to augment your damage, then you have your Eternity Surge, which is basically like a burst window that you have, like your every 30 seconds you have a burst possibility with Eternity Surge. You have also your Fire's Breath, which is also a lot of damage, but also has a property with Scarring Flame, which is going to dispel 4 or 3 beneficial magic effects, depending on like if you're taking a talent, like for example Font of Magic or not. You have your Deep Breath, which is very like theatrical, and it does look cool and it does like do a lot of damage, and also it stuns, which gives you opportunities to land your big damage spikes. You have Tipped Scales, which is a CD, which is not the most impressive CD, but it is something you can pull off by doing Showering Star into your Eternity Surge into a Tip the Scales Fire Breath. It does a lot of damage whenever you're going to then spam Disintegrate. You have Disintegrate, which is probably your top 2 most used spells in the game. I would say even top 1. You're kind of spamming it, and it does a lot of damage. You have your Living Flames whenever you're having like instant casts, procs. You can just use that. You even sometimes can just hard cast it. Even if you're kicked on your red spells, you have your blue spells, you have your green spells. If you're kicked on your sphere, like your Sleepwalk, you can still do all the things that you were doing before. You have your defensive on the black spells, you have a defensive on the red spells. Even your time stop, I think, is not tied to a school, so you can always use that, I think. I never like get really silenced or interrupted as a evoker, because it seems like people don't know how to interrupt it, or whenever they do, they never interrupt it on the important things. And I think it is a good designed spec, but I think too simplistic for me. I think that it needs something extra. I would even say like it needs 2 extra buttons to deal damage. I think spamming Disintegrate to deal damage is a bit silly compared to other specs that has to go into lengths, like for example putting an Immolate as a Destruction Warlock, trying to do Incinerates, Chaos Bolts, Conflags. Then you have your Fizz, then you have of course your Mortal Coil. You have your your curses, you have your Bane, you have multiple things, like your Havoc, excuse me. You have multiple things that you have to think about, while I think as Evoker, most of the time, if I'm not Shattering Starring, Eternity Surge, or Fire Breathing, I'm just like spamming Disintegrate, sometimes a Living Flame, and sometimes I'm just spamming like an Azure Strike to slow someone. So, or getting like those essence bursts. I think it's also a great mechanic. Like essences are very very cool. I think the mechanic of like holding off to deal more damage, or to have like more interesting effects is something that I would like to see on different other specs. I think that empowering stuff is interesting and can be like enhancing the gameplay, but I would like to see them to add more stuff. Now I think in the War Within you get some stuff added, but it is like not going to be like groundbreaking either. So again, I think Devastation Evoker is really strong because it's also have Obsidian Scales, which is a 12 seconds duration damage reduction on yourself, and you can also have like a PvP talent, which is going to give you immunity to interrupt, silence, and pushbacks effects. You already are never going to be like interrupted or silenced as much as an Affliction Warlock, for example. But if you take this, like you're pretty much like God mode whenever you're doing your Dragon Rage. Often you can even do Dragon Rage with your Obsidian Scales, and you cannot really get stopped and it does a lot of damage as well. I think the builds are interesting because you have a few things that you can like hop on, hop off, and depending on what you want to play, you can do more damage on your deep breath. You can decide, look, I want to be able to do every minute a deep breath. You can easily like go take some talents here out to achieve that. So that's also interesting. I think also PvP talents is one of the best classes in the game with the PvP talents, and that is augmentation, preservation evoker, and devastation evoker. Like all specs totally are very cool PvP talents wise. Like you have chrono loop, which is going to loop someone and 5 seconds later it gets returned to their previous location and health. Again, it can get dispelled, but for the occasion where it is not dispelled, it is actually very powerful. You have time stop, which is also like very, very strong. It is like a Zonias in League of Legends pretty much, and you can like stop whenever you want. For example, I'm going to time stop it and you can just reactivate it to stop the time stop, which is a really cool ability. You have swoop up, which again I've seen a few things. For example, in BGs they swoop to a target location with the enemy, and then they push them away with wing buffet, pretty much like scoring a kill in some RPGs, which is really interesting. You have nullifying shroud, also a big city and very flavorful as well, to be able to not get CC'd at least for 30 seconds or 3 full loss control effects. And trust me, it's not easy to get like CC 3 times in a row and then a 4th time. Generally people are like either dispelling it or just forgetting about CC on you. You have urban flight, basically you giving you a movement speed reduction, immunity for the duration of hover, which is also interesting. Crippling force also very strong because you can basically like slow someone to the point where it feels like they are rooted. You have divide and conquer, which is basically like a ice wall from your frost mages, fire mages, or arcane mages, which again is a very powerful like PvP talent to have, especially if you have like a 1 minute CD deep breath. You don't really take it for the damage, but the line of sight can just make you score kills. You have Dreamcatcher, which I think should be probably like just on the class tree. Being able to spam Sleepwalk is very strong. The cast time is a bit increased, but at least you will be feeling like a warlock where you can just like spam fear. I do feel like evokers have a CC problem, but understandably the kit doesn't allow you to be able to CC as much because you're too strong. Your damage is really simple, and I think the difference between a very strong devastation evoker and a very bad one is very minimal, at least damage wise. And then you have Dreamwalker's Embrace, which I think is not really a good DPS PvP talent, but for a preservation evoker it adds up, especially in 2v2. You're very strong because of that, and increases movement speed as well, so it's very, very strong. So again, you have also your Obsidian Metal and Scarring Flame, which I already discussed about it. I think if I'm looking at that, and I am like, for example, Death Knight, or I am, for example, a Fury Warrior, I would say, or if I am like a Retribution Paladin, or if I am even a Fire Mage, I'm very jealous because I don't have like that many choices. Legitimately, you can choose 3 different talents at any point in time, depending on the BG or 2v2 or 3v3 you're playing, or even solo shuffle or comp wise. And that's something that I think is very valuable. I think the class tree is also quite interesting, although I would say that choices are very limited and they are not always going to be good. I think also a root on a 1.5 minute CD is a bit ridiculous, but the root is really strong, so I do understand. I think they can change a few things up. They are going to change it in the War Within, and it's for the better, in my opinion. But I still think like they have like a basic class tree, which is a good one, but they can just change it, and they will change. And the spec tree, I think you have enough choices to have some meaningful choices. I would say the left tree is pretty much PvE with like the Firestorm and the Bombardment or whatever it is called, to do a lot of AoE damage. And then you have like your middle tree and like your right tree with the blue spells, which are more PvP oriented. Um, Overall, Devastation Evoker is like a very strong spec. And if you want to play a range spec which feels like a BM hunter but is not a BM hunter, you could pretty much play this. I would judge the easiness of that spec probably on like near the same level as a BM hunter. I think the rotation is really simple to understand. You have still a few things that you are going to look forward. For example, your Shining Star, you don't want to waste it. Your Eternity Surge, you kind of have to tie it with your Shining Star because it does an insane amount of damage. You can crit around 400k on these things. For example, with your Dragon Rage. You have also buffs like, for example, Iridescence whenever you're casting an Empower spells. Increases damage of your next two spells of the same color. For example, if you're doing Eternity Surge, your next two disintegrates are going to be augmented. But disintegrate even has a chance on sending like 50% Eternity Surges, which again at this point will also proc Iridescence. You have obviously your causality, so whenever you're spamming disintegrate, you're going to get your empower spells faster. You have also more damage on your Essence Burst. So for example, if you're getting an Essence Burst, you get 50% more damage. So all these things are going to line up correctly for you to deal insane amount of damage and also just insane amount of pleasure while doing it. So I like that. I like the fact that you're going to feel like a class that is hurting a lot. And it's very smooth to play. It's not like very gimmicky, and it's not really, I would say, clunky, which I think a lot of specs do still feel like that. And then you have your Preservation Evoker. I think it's going to be quite a long video, but I want to think about it. I want to talk about it with you guys. Preservation Evoker is, in my opinion, the spec that is the most fun to play if you want to play PvP and you're a DPS and you look into a healing spec, but you don't want to do only healing. I think Preservation Evoker is a blast. Like, your Disintegrate does a lot of damage. Your Living Flames, which you get like free instant procs with your Forset, which is going to come in the War Within as well on your spec tree, so you can have like instant Living Flames as well. That is insane. And your Fire Breath, whenever you're doing like a Tip the Scales, which often is going to be paired with your Fire Breath, you can do a Fire Breath into a Disintegrate or Fire Breath into Living Flame into Disintegrate, and you can pretty much like burst someone down. And then you have your HOTS, which are really impactful HOTS. Every time you're doing an Echo, which your Echo is something you're always going to try to press because it's very strong. But if you're echoing, your spell is going to be causing to be costed an additional time, even stronger than your initial cost, which is in 105%, for example. So you always want to do an echo into your Dream Breath, for example. So you have 2 hots on yourself, and then an echo with a reversion, so you have 4 hots on you. And mind you, those hots heal for more than rest of the druid hots for some reason. I know, crazy. It would be probably a bit more awesome if they like took away a bit of that mastery thing for rest of the druids and actually put more power into HOTS and have a different mastery that is playing a bit more interestingly. But it is what it is. Living Flame, healing for insane amount of damage. Healing if you're like going to pair with your Forset, being able to have multiple HOTS on yourself with your reversions, with your Dream Breath. You have also Stasis, which is also interesting. You want to pair it with your Verdant Embrace, for example, into a big Dream Breath. I don't have it right now. But then you can just cast it and you have everything popped up at the same time, which is also awesome. You have also an insane spec tree, in my opinion, because even though you don't really have too many options, and I wish it had more options, you have a lot of meaningful spells. For example, the middle tree gives you a lot of like the offensive power, and I think in this spec tree in the War Within is going to be better. That's for sure, because there is a lot of like talent placements that are a bit different. But like you have your Fire Breath healing 5 nearby injured allies for 80% of damage done, and you can crit over 250k. So obviously it is split. It's not that good, But in twos, for example, or in threes, whenever you only have like one target that is very injured and the other one is not, you can heal for big amount of healing, and so you're not really punished for going aggressive, which I think should happen a bit more often for other healers. Then you have Life Force Mender, which is going to guarantee that your damage and your healing is going to be equal to your maximum health, and it's going to be augmented. So if you have, for example, 1.6 million and it is going to get 2% more damage from a fire breath because of your max HP, it is going to guarantee a minimum amount of damage you're going to do to the enemy. So it's something you can also add on different healing specs. I also think that the CDs are very meaningful. Time dilation is very strong. Rewind is very strong. Stasis is very strong. Unfortunately, I think Dreamflight is very interesting, but it's a 2-minute CD, which I'm not really a fan of. It would be more fun if you could actually make it a 1-minute CD. I think it would be too strong for that as well, but it could be more interesting as well. I think Cycle of Life is more of a PvE talent, but you have also Liveblind, which is a very interesting talent as well. So whenever you're going to Verdant Embrace, you're going to bond your life with an ally and causing your healing on either partner to heal the other for 40% of the amount. So you can see it as a mini hard squad on the Holy Paladin, the beacon of light, I think, something like that, which is going to duplicate the healing for a smaller amount. It is the same with Livebind, and Verdant Embrace is a big amount of healing you're going to provide on your allies. I personally like it. Yeah, I think they nailed the Preservation Evoker fantasy. You have so many buttons to press as well. I think the complexity of Preservation Evoker is way higher than Devastation Evoker, and I would say that if you're playing right now Preservation Evoker, you disregard about the models, I think you're playing the best, most fun spec in the game, at least for healing. I would even say that it is more fun than Disc Priest. But the only reason why I don't play that much is because I don't really like the models. But again, your PvP talents are like consistently very interesting. You have even Dream Projection, which is going to dispel all the magical effects and also heal you for insane amount of healing. Although it's a bit like clunky how you use it. Like for example, you have to press your 2 or whatever, so you have your Dream Projection, and then you're going to press another time to stop it. So you lose control of your character. So you kind of have to be playing a lot of Dream Projection to understand how it works. But the healing is really nice as well. And overall, I think it's a fantastic spec. I think it flourishes the class tree by miles. I think it is one of the best spec trees in the game, although again I would like to see more interesting choices talent wise and healing wise, but I understand why it's not the case, because in PvE you might maybe play more of the right side, I don't know. So again, I think there's multiple things that you can play around and have fun with. Like for example, you have a damaging spec possibility on the last tier of spells you can take from the talent tree, which is giving you more damage on disintegrate and generating mana. Again, things that you could implement on holy paladins, like being able to do judgments or holy shocks on the enemy to regen mana, would be like fantastic, but it is not the case right now. Or resto druids, which have the wrath possibilities that whenever they're moonkin, that is going to be removed. Now it's going to be different in the War Within though, but it's also going to be able to be wrathing or starfiring to get mana, which is a good thing. Disc Priest has like the shield, so whenever they're putting a shield and it gets absorbed completely, it gets your mana. It's also quite good. I think every single healing spec should have like something more offensive to help you regen mana and to actually reward you for going aggressive. So I really like this. I actually enjoy Preservation Evoker, and I would recommend everyone to play it if you can bypass the models, which I understand if you're not. Then you have Augmentation Evoker, which I'm going to have a hot take. I think it is a very flavorful spec. I actually like it, and I think it's a very fun spec. The issue is that they wrote themselves into a corner like a storyteller would write themselves like their story into a corner where they cannot really go away, and it is what it is at this point. I think the support archetype should be able to work in PvP and PvE. It just is a shame that right now you only have one spec, which is Augmentation Evoker. So obviously, whenever it is too much of a meta, or obviously whenever it's too strong in PvE, it cannot exist in that form in PvP. But also, it makes you have to take an Augmentation Evoker in raids or in Mythic Plus, which they kind of said that they're not going to take classes anymore over players. Now it's more players over classes. And what they have right now is you kind of have to pick an Augmentation Evoker, you kind of have to pick a Shadow Priest, which I think is a bit silly. So since you only have one support spec in the game, it makes for very tough balancing choices. And I think if you added every single class a support spec, it could exist and flourish a bit better. But now we have this abomination as a spec, not in the sense of the gameplay, but more of the sense of nothing really works in PvP except if you're playing with a hard carry. Pretty much. I played threes with Augmentation Evoker. I played solo shuffle as an Augmentation Evoker. I played in RBGs, not in RBGs, but in like random BGs and Battleground Blitz as Augmentation Evoker. And I can say in BGs, you are insane. It's very strong. You're buffing everyone. Whenever you're using your Eben Might, it gives you and your allies insane amount of damage. And it's 4 allies at once. So trust me, you are like imbuing that many people that you're pretty much like something really needed in those environments, and you're very much a catalyst of being able to destroy healers because you're giving damage to DHs, arms warriors, and retribution paladins, and those healers are not going to survive. So I think Augmentation Evoker is very, very strong as well, and I think the burst is not that bad. So if you're doing Eben Might into a big Breath of Aeons, into a big Tip the Scales Fire Breath, into Upheaval, and then spam of Eruption, it can deal some insane amount of damage. Like I can show you guys one time again. These are quite long, but you can pretty much like say, look, I'm going to go in combat. Boom, I'm in combat. I put like my Even Might. I put like the tip of the skills already, and I'm going to do this. Boom. You can just spam it, and it does a lot of damage. Like again, it does more damage when you're like actually getting hit because you have your blistering scales as well, which is giving you a bit of damage. But you see, if you're spamming eruptions, the damage is not that bad. And also, you have your Eagle Might like pretty much like 100% uptime, especially if you're like able to spam your eruptions. It adds up and it does a lot of damage. Then you have your Fire Breath, you take like a full Fire Breath into a upheaval, and boom, you're set and you're doing a lot of damage. So by itself, you would say like, look, the Devastation Evoker is going to deal way more damage than a Augmentation Evoker. That's true. I think Upheaval, it's like a lower version of Entity Surge. A Fire Breath does okay, respectable damage, but nowhere near the same damage as Devastation Evoker. Your Living Flames and Eruptions are nowhere near as strong as Disintegrate from a Devastation Evoker, but you're adding also more damage to everyone. I like the concept, but in social it doesn't work because you're really just a lower DPS. It seems like you're playing a double healer comp, which is not working in this current meta because you have dampening, but also I think you are quite squishy and you don't really add up enough, I would say, value to the teams. I think in threes you can make it work depending on the comps, and even then it looks more like boosting than anything else. In solo shuffle, since you don't really choose your comps, it's really hard to make like a justifiable choice to play Augmentation Evoker. You can win games again. I have like I done like a 5-1 and then I did a 1-5. So you see that the I did 2 soul shuffles. The second soul shuffle, which was a 1-5, kind of made me decide to just not play Augmentation Evoker anymore in soul shuffle. I personally just don't like it enough to justify my time as Augmentation Evoker in soul shuffle. I did some 3s as well as Augmentation Evoker. I think I lost like 1 game and I won like 3 games. And the rest I played Devastation Evoker, which we had way easier times to win. I did some 2s as a Preservation Evoker mostly, and also Devastation Evoker, which were the lost games because I kind of sucked as Devastation Evoker in 2s. But I think overall, Augmentation Evoker should probably get a rework, or you add more support specs. It's one or the other, because I think in current version of WoW, only have 1 support. It will always be the black sheep of the classes and the specs. It will always have to be underpowered and underappreciated. It looks like a tank spec, while it is not a tank spec. That's the issue, because you could have like kind of the same damage as a protection warrior. You could also like redirect a lot of the damage because of being a protection warrior. And yeah, I think they need to do something around that. I think in BGs you have insane amount of value, but in like arenas, I don't think you can have a lot of fun with it. So I will say in the War Within, probably you will see a lot of Augmentation Evokers in BGs, because I do feel like it's meta, and I do feel like it's very strong. Is it going to be very much played? I don't think so, because Evokers is not the most popular spec like class out there. Not everyone wants to play Drag tier, which is understandable. And also you have Devastation Evoker existing and Preservation Evoker as well as an alternative as a support spec, because you could see Preservation Evoker as a support spec because of the amount of damage you can actually provide to your team. So that's pretty much my review to the 3 classes, 3 specs. TLDR, you most likely didn't see the whole video, but if you do, please let me know in the comment section below. TLDR, I think Devastation Evoker is the best spec in the game, and probably will be continuing it like this in the War Within because of the hero tons. I think there is one where it adds insane amount of damage as well, and the other one is more of a utility one, but still it's also is a very good one. I did test it on the beta if I'm not mistaken. Yes, I did. But it's too laggy. Like, I didn't like it because of the lagginess, but I did like the things that it was adding on your character between Dragonflight and the War Within. Preservation Evoker is probably a very recommended healer to play if you're like looking for a healer and you're a DPS main and you don't want to feel like you're healing. I think the Preservation Evoker is really fun. I think the skill requirement to play Preservation Evoker is way higher than some specs though, so you have to be careful. I think there's a lot of things that you need to learn to be able to be good as Preservation Evoker, especially the range, because you're very much into their face, and so you have to know when to like get away from your mates and whenever you have to go in for your mates. And I think Augmentation Evoker is a nice idea, but it is pretty much like a failed project, and they need to reassess the situation either by doing a full rework and making it DPS spec, which like would be a very big failure for Blizzard, or you add way more support specs so you could actually make Augmentation Evoker feel like they are like deserving a spot in World of Warcraft, because right now it feels like you're a black sheep, so it will never really be very good. It will always be like the support spec in PvE, which doesn't add too much damage, or in PvP the one that is going to help a bit of a boosting, but you're not going to like have the decision making to win games because of the kit and numbers on your kit. So anyways, also other TLDR, I don't like the drag tier. Maybe if they change it, why not? But I don't feel like even if you put other races, it will not change anything. As long as you have like the drag tier model, which is not showing any transmog, which I think is stupid. Your like a transmog is literally end game for a lot of people. So this is like really bad, especially like it looks very generic. I don't really like it. Most people are like running even naked. The armor is really generic. It looks more like leveling armor to me. But anyways, thank you for watching this video. Really appreciate you. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that yet. If you have watched the whole video, let me know in the comment section below, and hopefully I can show you guys other stuff going into the war within. Again, thank you. Have a great day. Bye.